So, we're fortunate today to have Mr. Corey Steele with us. Mr. Steele serves as the Nebraska State Court Administrator, a position he has had since 2014. Prior to that time, he served in various capacities in the area of juvenile probation, Deputy Probation Administrator for the State Juvenile Services, Juvenile Justice Specialist for the Nebraska Office of Probation Administration. He also served as the Acting Chief Probation Officer in Omaha's Juvenile Probation Office, Lancaster County Human Services, Juvenile Justice Coordinator, Juvenile Probation Officer here in Lincoln many moons ago. Mr. Steele was named the Nebraska Judicial Branch's Employee of the Year a few years back. Mr. Steele has taken degrees from UNK, University of Nebraska at Kearney, and at Doane College. Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Chris. Everybody hear me okay? Move that up a little bit if need to be. Thank you. I'll just go a little bit deeper about myself so you get to know me a little bit, my background and history, as that was a quick blush. I do like conversation, so I take questions at any time. I think it helps flow the presentation. But what I'm here today to talk about is our judicial branch, and you'll hear me talk a lot about the branch as a whole. We are a third branch of government. If you ask me, we're the best branch of government. We are a little modest in that, I will say, with the judicial branch. A little bit about me, and then I'll talk about what we do in the judicial branch as a whole, all the way from the courts through probation, Office of Public Guardian, and so forth, and you'll hear about all of that. Again, I'm Corey Steele. I've been the court administrator. It'll be 6 years next month. I was appointed by Chief Justice Mike Heavican, who is our current Chief Justice. As state court administrator, it is an appointed position. You're appointed by the Chief Justice and affirmed by the Supreme Court, the justices of the Supreme Court. I was pretty fortunate. I kind of fell into this. I'm completely honest about that. And probably some of you, such as Ann, I've known for a very, very long time, but fell into this position, and I was probably just as an aha moment as probably a lot of others were to learn that I was appointed. But I'll get to that story in a few moments. So my background is primarily probation. I grew up in the probation world. I primarily did probation work from right out of college all the way through till I was appointed as court administrator 6 years ago. And I felt, as the Chief Justice approached me about this position, I said, yeah, as probation officers and probation staff, we work for the courts. We're an arm of the court. We're in the judicial branch. Yeah, I've been in court. I know what court operations is about, right? There's a bailiff, there's a court reporter, there's the judge, and all of those. But didn't really realize the breadth of what the administrative office of the courts at the time, the operational side of the courts really meant. And so it's been a learning curve over the last couple years to learn as I grow in leading the judicial branch. So predominantly I started as a juvenile probation officer. I went to school at UNK, criminal justice degree, 4-year degree. I did an internship here in Lincoln in the adult probation office. At that time, we were allowed to get 9 credit hours, which is a lot, right? Love 9 credit hours to do 750 hours of internship. So between my junior and senior year, I literally started the Monday after we got done with finals, and I worked 40 hours a week, sometimes a little bit more because we did some evening and weekend work, all the way through the Friday before we started classes. So it was my summer job that I paid for, got 9 credit hours, and worked 40 hours a week. But I will tell you, it was the best experience I had. It helped me get the job that I needed out of college and grow into what I've done to this point. So I interned here in Lincoln in the adult probation office. When I graduated college with a 4-year degree, the state had a hiring freeze. So we're talking 22 years ago. The state had a hiring freeze, and we're only hiring essential functioning positions across the state government. And at that point in time, there was no probation officer openings. The only opening was a drug tech. How many of you in here know what a drug tech does? You can kind of guess, right? You're the guy that collects all the pee samples, okay? So that was an essential position within the judicial branch because there was no drug tech in Lincoln because the individual left, quit, and as you can imagine, drug tests are an important component of what we do in supervision of probation, and so that was considered an essential position. So I have a 4-year degree, I'm getting married in a year, and I start with the state of Nebraska at $7.50 an hour, and I spend probably 6 of my 8 hours of my day in the bathroom collecting pee samples. And I tell myself, wow, that college degree paid off, right? Now I look back, it has, and it has in numerous ways. I got my foot in the door. Knowing that the next probation officer opening, I was engaged, I was with probation, I was in the office, I was doing a lot of things, communicating, learning, educating myself with the probation staff. And so that next position, the very next position that came open, I only had to do that for 4 months, thank goodness, be a drug tech for 4 months. I got my first probation officer job. My first job was in Fremont, Nebraska. They transferred me into Fremont, Nebraska, and I was what was called at that time an intensive supervision probation officer. So I had all the high-risk individuals, district court. If they failed with probation, they went to prison. Okay? That was the first position I had. We've really changed our system where no longer does a new college grad come out of school with no experience supervise our high-risk individuals. Now that is reserved for those officers that have been with us for a very long time and have built their skills up to be able to work with those high-end clientele. So I started in Fremont, was there about a year, and then a juvenile position in Lincoln came open. And I really liked working with juveniles. I did a lot of coaching, did a lot of refereeing, did a lot of things through college and high school that I like to work with youth, mentored a lot of youth and did some things. So I applied for that position and was able to transfer into Lincoln and be a juvenile probation officer. And that's kind of where my career really catapulted in working with those juveniles. I was in Lincoln for 2 years in the probation office and then was promoted into what was called a juvenile justice coordinator position at the time. It kind of grew and evolved from managing the grants in Lancaster County to oversight of all the programs and services for the juveniles. I did that for about 7 years in what I would call as program implementation, program monitoring, grant funding, those types of things. Did that for 7 years, and then we had a new administrator that came into the Administrative Office of Probation, Ellen Burkowski, and she was a really catalyst for change in the way that we do probation supervision and services today. Ellen came in, and we had nobody in the Administrative Office that had purview over juvenile justice. We had policy and procedure of how we treated juveniles the exact same as an adult, but they just transitioned a little bit. They said, oh yeah, you need to have family engagement too. So we had one policy book, and it was an adult policy book that we just used for juvenile. And Ellen had a fundamental belief that said we need to treat juveniles differently than we treat adults. We need to supervise and case manage and provide services in a different manner. I was fortunate enough to apply for that position and was hired in the administrative office to be the first person in the state probation that had sole purview over juvenile justice within the state of Nebraska for juvenile probation. In that time that I was there, I was able to move juvenile probation into a unified juvenile service delivery across the state. What that means is no longer as a probation officer will you supervise adults and juveniles. You'll either be an adult officer or a juvenile officer. Our training is completely different. There's juvenile-specific training and there's adult-specific training. Our instruments that we use are different. Adult instruments versus juvenile instruments. All of those things were created over that time frame I was with the Administrative Office of Probation in that juvenile position. Over 4 years, we transitioned that and created a juvenile probation system across the state. With that, we garnered a lot of funding from the state to pay for services for kids. So we now can pay for group homes, we can pay for treatment services, and we can do a lot of those things. I was promoted to Deputy Probation Administrator. We created some state statute that helped guide us and move us into this direction. And I was Deputy Probation Administrator for a little over a year. That is what I feel, in my opinion, catapulted me to this position. Because I worked with the legislature on legislative change, because I created a juvenile probation system, because I was one of those individuals within the administrative office that reported and spoke with the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court about what was going on a regular basis. Put me in front of the court. Put me with the Chief Justice explaining why we're doing things, how we're doing things, and what we continue to need and how we need to push forward in some other areas. Because of that, when longtime court administrator Janice Walker retired, Chief Justice Heavican appointed me and came to me and said, I want you to be the next court administrator. What do you think? And that's where I had that real smart, response, sure, I've been in court before. I know what the courts are about. And then my next learning curve really took off as court administrator. So you're asking yourself, what does the court administrator do? And I'll talk a little bit about court administration, what we do, what that means. And you'll hear me talk about, we transition now to a judicial branch. We're now the Administrative Office of the Courts and Probation. A year and a half ago, that probation administrator who took a chance on me and hired me to come in and create a juvenile system, Ellen Murkowski, retired. And it gave us a chance in the judicial branch to kind of reorganize. Reorganize in a sense that as court administrator, I had been on about 4 years now, and I recognized that the Supreme Court really wasn't isolated from probation issues. And as we had a lot of juvenile justice deals that have come down the road in the last few years with legislation and policy change nationally and locally, adult transformation with Community Corrections Act, the court was too close to probation. So I made a recommendation to the Supreme Court that said, you're really not isolated from if there are challenges or issues with probation. And I feel as a court administrator, I've talked to my colleagues across the United States, that probation should be under the court administrator, and I had some fundamental beliefs why. And I presented that to the court, and the court firmly believed the same thing. So a year and a half ago, they slid all of probation under the state court administrator as well. So that's why we've created one unified administrative office. We've created unified policy, procedure, and practices, how we work as a branch. And we've really moved forward in holistically coming together as a court family. We still have a probation administrator. Statutorily, we have to have a probation administrator. But that probation administrator reports to me. Deb Minardi, she was a longtime chief probation officer in Omaha and then was deputy administrator under Ellen's purview for adult services. She's been promoted a year and a half ago to that position, and she reports to me, and then I report to the court. So my purview is the court. So you'll hear me talk about Administrative Office of the Courts and probation. And so this isn't just about courts, it's about our judicial branch. So when you have questions, you can talk anything about probation or courts, and we'll get into some court functions. Let me talk a little bit about the Administrative Office. What is our purview? What do I do, and what is the purview of the Administrative Office of the Courts and Probation? Again, if you think about the hierarchical, Chief Justice Heavican is the same as the governor. The governor runs the executive branch, right? The Speaker of the legislature runs the legislative branch. Chief Justice Heavican runs the judicial branch, okay? And so he's kind of the governor, if you will, of the judicial branch. And I, as appointed by him, am allowed, based on the Constitution, to run the operational side of the courts. You heard Chris in the opening, I am not an attorney. Across the United States, it's about 50-50. Court administrators, some of them are attorneys, some of them aren't. Some of them are prior judges, and their Constitution requires they must have been a judge and come up through the judicial ranks to run their administrative office of the courts. State of Nebraska does not, and it has been kind of long-standing. The state of Nebraska has not had an attorney in that position. They've had a couple over the years, but predominantly the last few of us have not been attorneys. If you think about it, we run the administrative function, personnel, IT, all of those types of functions, which doesn't require a JD to do those things. I do have a master's degree, a master's in management from Doane, and that's where I get my my background and my history in order to, what I feel, to perform the functions that I have as state court administrator. So what does state court administration do? What do we do in our office? We have administrative purview over the court system. We're roughly about 1,600 employees statewide. We have a yearly budget of a little over about $210 million. We pay for services for probationers. We function and operationally have staffing in all of the courts. We are in every county across the state. All 93 counties have Supreme Court judicial branch staff. I'll talk a little bit about our structure and how our structure may be a little bit different from state to state. All court systems are a little bit different, but we do call our state a unified court system, which means we're unified in the sense that we have one administrative oversight over the court system, with a small exception. Okay? Let me talk about administratively, and then I'll talk about the court system. Administratively, we have several divisions in the administrative office. First is we have trial court services. Amy Prenda has been with me about 8 months now. Amy has been a great asset to our team. She's the Deputy Administrator for Trial Court Services. That's everything operational in the court system in all of the counties. So all of the clerk's offices that we'll talk about, what I call is the back end or the administrative function of the court system, the local trial court system, all of those things is under Amy's purview, as well as court reporters and those things that function within the court. Language access, I'll talk a little bit about language access and what we do there, provide the court system and probation system with all linguistic access services for anybody that comes into our system. So Amy runs that division for me. And then we have information technology. Jennifer Rasmussen runs all of Judicial Branch Information Technology. It used to be we had a single case management system for all of our courts. All 93 courts are under one case management system, and all probation districts, we have 12 probation districts, are under one probation case management system. And we supply all of those 1,600 employees with IT and technology type things. That position has grown immensely in the last, as you can imagine, 5 to 7 years with technology. We try to outfit all of our courts with the latest technology. If you go to Lancaster County District Court and you sit in on a trial, we can have expert witness testimony from a doctor in California, and we can put that doctor up on a screen that can see the whole courtroom, and we can see that individual, and that communication goes back and forth. If you've watched the news, you have seen where people have been arrested and they're sitting in a cell and they're actually having that hearing while that individual is sitting in the cell, the use of technology. So we have all of the prison systems set up remote technology as well, where we can have prisoners staying at the prison and we handle their hearings in that manner instead of bringing them into court, as that's a safety risk. So technology has really blossomed over the last couple years. With some of the pandemic issues that we've been hearing about as of the last couple weeks, we're making sure we have our Supreme Court set up where they can hold oral arguments via WebEx technology, where each justice can be in their home. The attorneys can be coming in from their offices, and it's being a virtual courtroom and being held in that manner. So all of these things are really evolving technology-wise, providing technology for our judicial branch. So Jennifer Rasmussen does technology both for probation and courts, and provides us with everything we need. As I said, one of the biggest benefits to being a unified system is we have one case management system for all levels of the court, that all of that court information goes into across the state. So we're not a county by county, and they all have different systems. So we can pull data somewhat easy, Ann likes to ask a lot of data questions and pull data from us. But we try to be able to be as good as we can. It does help to have one system instead of 93 separate systems in collecting that information. We also have Attorney Services Division under the Judicial Branch. Attorney Services Division is there's a couple things. If you go to law school and you're going to take the bar, they provide the bar examination twice a year. They make sure attorneys keep their credentialing up every year. They track CLEs, continuing legal education hours for attorneys. Attorney discipline is also under attorney services. So if there's attorneys and there's issues that you're having with an attorney, you can file a complaint against an attorney and there's an investigation done. And we also do unauthorized practice of the law. If you don't have a law license, you can't practice law in the state of Nebraska. And so we also deal with unauthorized practice of the law through attorney services. Carol McMahon-Boyce is our Director of Attorney Services with the Judicial Branch. Okay. Then we have the Office of Public Guardian. This is still relatively new, going into its 5th year. The Office of Public Guardian is there for the most vulnerable Nebraskans in the state. These are those either young or old that are vulnerable and don't have anybody that can't take care of them, or they don't have anybody that will take care of them. They can be a guardian, which is they look out for their best interests. They're appointed as a parent for that individual. Or they can be what's called a conservator, and they're only in there to look out for their monetary value of those individuals. So the Office of Public Guardian was created by the state legislature 6 years ago, and we've put that into place. And currently we are at capacity. We have about 325 individuals that we are the guardians for across the state of Nebraska. They must go through the court. The court must appoint us as a guardian or conservator for those individuals. We have 16 what we call associate guardians across the state that do the case management of those individuals that are placed on as wards of the Office of Public Guardian. We'll talk a little bit more about that because there's some potential, as Chris and I talked about, internships in all of these avenues, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that. We also have Court Improvement Project within the Administrative Office. Court Improvement Project is a federal program that is there to look out for the court to continue to increase the availability and capacity for individuals that are coming in on abuse and neglect petitions through the juvenile court. So they're to improve functions and how we operate in the juvenile court system. So Court Improvement Project, we have a director, which is Deb Van Dyke Reese. We have a division that goes out. There's also a lot of individuals that intern there and do court observation. Part of the federal money that we receive must be spent on going in and observing juvenile court and making sure that they're looking out for the best interests of the juveniles that come in front of them. Again, these are abused and neglected kids that come in front of the juvenile court. So Court Improvement Project also is under the Administrative Office. Next, we have the Administrative Office. As I talked about of probation on the other side, Deb Minardi is the administrator for the Office of Probation. We have 3 divisions there as well. Oh, I forgot one division. We have Gene Cotter, who's Deputy Administrator for Operations. Operations is anything operational for our branch that you can think of. Personnel, we have a personnel division. We have, what else do we have under Gene's division? Anything operational you can think of within a branch is what is under Gene's purview as Deputy Administrator for Operations. Then in probation, we have, as I said, we have Deb Minardi. Then we have 2 Deputy Administrators there. One is Bob Denton. Bob Denton is a longtime Chief Probation Officer in Fremont, has come to the Administrative Office as a Deputy Administrator now, and his purview is all of the adult services that we provide. I say services a lot because that's the way we perceive it in probation. We not only case manage or supervise, we provide services. We pay for a lot of mental health, substance abuse, sexual evaluations, and encompasses the individual issues that individual came to the court for. We provide services. We may contract for those services or pay for those services. We don't necessarily provide those services, but we see that as all encompassing in what we do on the probation side, both adults and juveniles. And then we have a juvenile deputy administrator, Jeannie Bradner. And I actually hired Jeannie and brought Jeannie in under me as deputy administrator of juvenile services 8 years ago. And Jeannie now is the deputy administrator for all juvenile services for the state of Nebraska. Just to give you a little bit of what we do on the juvenile side, we not only supervise individuals, but we also pay for services. In the tune of about $35 to $40 million a year, we pay for services for juveniles that families can't afford that, okay? We have a process that they go through. Obviously, we want to look at insurance. We want to look at other abilities to pay, Medicare, Medicaid, all of those things. And then if those funding streams aren't there, we do not have any barriers to juveniles getting the services they need in the state of Nebraska. We'll pay for those services. So a lot of substance abuse, a lot of mental health, and a lot of what we call juveniles who sexually harm treatment that we utilize. Just to give you kind of a little purview and an inside scoop of what it costs for a juvenile to be in a facility, what came to me just last week for approval is we have a young juvenile in Omaha that's going to a very high-end specialized mental health facility with a one-on-one. That juvenile and that facility will cost us between $12,000 and $14,000 a month to pay for the services for that one juvenile, okay? But this is a very, very high-end kid with severe mental issues that we got to address. We can't just put them in a room and lock them up. We address all the juvenile needs for those individuals. So everything from that to something very simplistic as job readiness training is what we provide for our office. So that's kind of the breadth and the purview of the administrative office. So as I said, we're up to about 1,600 employees. That's from judges on down. We don't call judges employees, obviously, appointed judges. So we have 149 judicial spots within the state of Nebraska, and then the staff for the courts, the staff for the judges, the staff for the administrative office, and the staff for probation is what we have statewide. Let me talk a little bit about how our system is set up, both courts and probation. I'll start with the court sides. As I talk to you about the courts, what we say are unified. which means we pretty much have purview over all of the courts and the structure of the courts in the state, except for one little nugget, and that would be the clerks of the district court. In the state of Nebraska, the clerks of the district court are still elected officials, and they are paid for by the county, and their staff are paid for by the county. Outside of that purview, pretty much the rest of the branch, court side, is paid for by the state. We have had legislation, and we have something currently in committee right now that we're trying to move forward to maybe change that and bring that under the auspice of the administrative office and the judicial branch. We feel that if fundamentally we have oversight over the branch, we should have fundamental oversight over all of the branch. So it's difficult for me to say, here's how we need to operate our district courts when we have a district court clerk that's an elected official and a county employee. So that causes a little bit of issue in our system. Other than that, we have two-tier clerk's offices. We have district court. As they're an elected official, that is for felony. That is your felony level district court. Then we have our clerk magistrates, which is our county court, which is all misdemeanor and juvenile outside of the three metropolitan areas, and I'll touch on why they're a little bit different. So we have two-tier clerk's offices. We have very large clerk's office. Our clerk's office in Omaha, right now we staff that at about 89 staff, to what we call single-person courts in greater Nebraska. Single-person courts mean we may have one individual that may have oversight over all of the clerk functions within that courthouse. We have courts that sometimes don't meet for months. They don't have any cases for months. We have some, as obviously as Omaha, which is very busy. So we have to write how we effectively staff all of those courts across the state and what that staffing ratio is, whether it's a single person court all the way to 89 people in our clerk's office there. As I talked about, what we say our clerk's offices are the back-end function for the court. We always say the judge gets the spotlight, right? They're in the black robe, they're in front of the court. Everything that happens within that court after the fact takes place in the clerk's office. The judge creates the order, the judge determines what the sentencing is, and then the clerk's office fulfills all of that back-end paperwork, whether it's collect fines and fees, all the orders that take place, notifying all parties. All of those things happen behind the scenes in the clerk's office. So you can imagine all the policy and procedure that we have and how we operate those court systems, especially with all of the different types of filings that we have. Everybody thinks that courts are just criminal. Actually, criminal is one of our smaller portions of what we do within our court system. The domestic and civil has really taken off. Our district court judges across the state of Nebraska handle 55% divorce, or what we call domestic cases, and only 32% criminal cases. So you can see, as you think a district court judge, you're going to be handling all the murders, all the assaults, all of the robberies. That's actually the smallest portion of what you do as a district court judge. The criminal and the civil side is much larger in what they actually handle. So that's kind of our courts and our offices across the state. Again, we are in the courthouses, all 93 counties. There is staffing in all 93 counties. And how we perform that, it maybe look a little bit different from county to county depending on the population and the number of cases that go through and what you see. Our probation districts, we have 12 probation districts across the state of Nebraska. Those probation districts kind of vary in size, obviously, in geography and what they do. So our Omaha and Lincoln, that is one probation district. So Omaha has its own probation district and Lincoln has its own probation district because of the size. But then you get out in the western part of the state, the Panhandle is just one probation district. And I think there's pictures in the information that I've given you of the probation districts and the size. We have one chief probation officer. They're in charge of that probation district. Obviously, we have state policy and procedure in which they need to follow, but they are in charge. They do the hiring of all the local probation staff, whether it be probation officers, support staff, drug techs, all of those things within the 12 probation districts. We actually have 14 chief probation officers. That's purposeful because in Lincoln and Omaha, we have an adult chief probation officer and we have a juvenile chief probation officer because of the size of those districts. So even though we have 12 districts for probation, we have 2 chiefs in that. Other districts, if you're a chief probation officer, you run both your adult side and your juvenile side. This is unique in Nebraska, where we have purview under the Administrative Office of the Courts and Probation on the judicial branch that we have both juvenile and adult probation. It's not uncommon across the United States that you'll see juvenile probation, but it is a little uncommon. There's only a handful of states, 4 or 5, that have adult probation under the judicial branch. Predominantly, adult probation is under the Department of Corrections and the executive branch. So we're a little bit different in what we do there. Let me talk a little bit about probation officers and their role and function. As you heard me say, I started out dealing with high-risk individuals, those individuals that if they failed probation were going to jail or prison. We've really changed the paradigm in how we supervise and case management individuals. As a new probation officer, you would come in as an officer that would have low-risk individuals. We do risk assessments on all the individuals that come in. And that's the risk to recidivate. They have core criminogenic risk factors, 5 risk factors: substance abuse, peers, education and employment, family and socioeconomic status. Those are called criminogenic issues or concerns that we look at. Obviously, the more issues you have in those categories, the higher risk you're going to be. And the higher risk you are means the higher risk you're going to continue your criminal thinking, your criminal patterns, and likelihood to get into further trouble. So as you can imagine, we supervise those in a much different manner than somebody that may have come in for a petty shoplifting and it's their first time and they've never been in trouble before. That's typically when you get done with school and you want to become a probation officer, you'll go in and be what we call a low-risk probation officer, or you'll do pre-sentence investigations, which is the report that goes to the court about the criminal background and history of the individual as well. So you would do an interview with that individual, collect all that information, and submit a report to the court. Over time, we continue to train and educate our officers and build their skill set as they continue to work with individuals. The longer you're with our probation system, you'll move up to a medium risk officer where you'll be dealing with individuals that have more issues and concerns, to high risk individuals. You can imagine the individuals that we see today, the 2 areas that we see the biggest issues that we need to address are substance abuse and mental health. Those are our 2 key factors that we really trigger in on in dealing with that. So obviously, we provide our probation officers a lot of substance abuse education and training and a lot of mental health education and training, to the point where we've really taken some of those high-risk positions and we hire credentialed folks. We actually hire people that are substance abuse counselors that they will then have all substance abuse individuals on their caseload. Mental health therapists will come and work for us as what we call them treatment officers in probation. And they're credentialed, they have their license, and they have all that experience in working with those high-end individuals to be able to case manage and treat them a little bit differently. You heard me say a lot of what we do is we pay for services as well. We get the right service at the right time for that individual. We pay for those services if they can't afford them. We never want treatment or payment for treatment to be a barrier to success for those individuals. So we pay for a lot of substance abuse evals as well, mental health evals on the adult side, and we pay for those treatments as well if it's needed and they can't afford them, because that treatment is going to be key to keeping them out of the court system. That's the whole goal of probation, is so those individuals don't continue to come back. What's happened over the last couple of years is our probation system has evolved as well. We now have part of what parole supervision used to be. So we have community corrections on the adult side, where we're seeing individuals that are anywhere from 3 years under out of prison no longer are going to parole. They're coming back out on probation, and we're supervising them on probation. So that's really changed the way that we supervise. We've had to really ratchet up and train our officers to really look at how we deal with individuals once they've gone into the Department of Corrections, because that's a much different population than those individuals that haven't gone to corrections or haven't gone through prison in that venue. Okay, questions. I've kind of rambled on here for about 20 minutes. I want to see if there's any questions at this time before I talk a little bit more about some new and inventive things that we're doing on the branch. What questions do you have? Yes?
So you mentioned that there were 2 different types of guardians, like constrictors and like a normal guardian.
Right. So conservator.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, conservator is the financial. They look out for all the financial aspects of that individual. And then a guardian, where you're appointed to look out for the well-being. And so you'd be like the parent of the individual. So there's two different types. They can do both. You can be a guardian and conservator, or you could just be the guardian of an individual if finances is an issue, or if they can manage on their own and they don't need somebody to act as a parent, you can just be the conservator. And the county court is the court that then would appoint our guardians and conservators.
So does each person have like both a guardian and a conservator, or is it like...
They could have both, or they could have one or the other. So we act in both capacities within our Office of Public Guardian. We could either be the guardian for the individual or the conservator or both. Typically, if you see a guardianship, you're going to see both guardian and conservator. They'll be doing both. But we have a lot that are just the conservator side of things. That they can manage and function in society fine. It's just they can't conceptually manage money or figure out how to manage money. So we have somebody that manages the money aspect for them. Yes? Which judge?
In Illinois.
Oh, in Illinois, okay.
In Sangamon County, Illinois. So, you said that they have single-person clerks? Like, they do everything?
Correct, so...
I was just a summer person, and...
So the clerk's office, so what I'm saying is, even the back end of the clerk that takes the filings, does all the stuff at the window, we have courts that just have one person that do everything. Now, as far as a law clerk, let me talk a little bit about law clerks too. Our judges across the state don't have law clerks either. The expectation is that they'll do a lot of their own legal review. So depending on what type of clerk you're talking about. You're talking about the clerk that accepts all the filings, does all the paperwork? Yeah. We actually have one clerk in our state that covers 4 counties. She is a clerk in 4 different counties up in the Sandhills. Now again, this is a county that'll go 6 months without any court filings. So very small, very desolate areas, do not have a lot of traffic. She's not the elected. This is on the county court side. Yep, this is the county court side. We also have something in our state, and I know Illinois does because I know the court administrator there really well, Marcia Meese. But we have electronic filing, which has really reduced the amount of time we're touching paper anymore. We will be, within the next 2 years, 100% electronic filing state, which means you are not allowed as an attorney to come and hand a piece of paper to the clerk anymore. It will have to be submitted electronically. We're probably 75% of the way there now. We just have some tricky issues on the civil side that produces a lot of filings that we're still working through because there's a lot of forms. But on the criminal side, criminal right now, we are predominantly 100% electronic filing. So the only difference is if you're what's called a pro se individual or a self-represented litigant, which means you're going to represent yourself, that'll be handled in a little bit different manner. But if you're an attorney and you're filing pleadings on the criminal side in Nebraska, the expectation is that'll be all done electronically. So you can see where that's reduced the amount of need for court staff to be shuffling papers. We have courts, we have quite a few courts within our state too that no longer have paper files. Everything is electronic. We outfit all of our judges with iPads, with whatever type of technology they want in order to do their jobs. We have judges that also travel. We have judges that travel to 5 or 6 counties within their judicial district as well. So when they're at that county, they literally grab their briefcase with their computer and they're off to the next county. There's not paper files. And so we're really getting into the electronic age in what we do. That's why I said the biggest growth within our administrative office is our IT infrastructure because of the way that we're moving in the world of IT. Great question. Yes.
And Sangamon County is not paper-free or anywhere near paper-free.
Yeah. Every state's a little bit different along the way, but every state is moving towards electronic filing in some form or fashion. Maybe just for certain petitions, certain groups. We're going to try to do it holistically across every case type. Yes?
Some counties like currently are already like paper-free. Do you know how Lancaster County is?
Lancaster County is not a paper-free, no.
Do you think they will be?
They will get there eventually. Our larger counties are harder, obviously, with the amount of case flow that they have. So an example of one of our paper-free counties is Keith County. Who knows where Keith County is? Where is it? Ogallala, right? So our county court is completely paperless in Keith County. So our judge out there, our county court judge, literally goes and he travels to 4 different counties in his jurisdiction, and he carries his laptop with him. Everything is right there, everything he needs for every case he can look up, and is scanned in and available for him, so we don't need paper files at all. So we're moving in that direction. What other questions? Yes? Nope.
Paper filing thing is really interesting. Will they also convert old files?
Yes, so we actually are scanning old files in. So what basically, there's retention schedules. So after this date, you don't need to retain the paper copies and they can be shredded. It's 10, 15, 20 years, depending on the case type. So anything after that date isn't available in the county courthouse anyways. So basically, now while we are scanning everything and everything is scanned electronically, we'll have electronic files and they'll no longer be paper files. And so eventually we'll get to the point where when everything's electronically filed, it's stored. Our biggest issue that we're going to combat is storage of electronic files. Used to be we had to have the shelf space and separate rooms to store all the case files. Now it's cloud storage and security of our files. So while we're talking IT, one of the things I want you to be aware of is you as a citizen can go online and you can look at any court case you want. Okay? We are an open court system unless there is statutory requirements on a few case types. Juvenile more than anything, they're sealed, criminal. But predominantly you can go online and look, and we're continuing to evolve our system so we're more open to the public. What I mean by that is here in the future, and hopefully still within my time in the next 5 to 7 years, my goal is you can do a case search on nebraska.gov of a county court case or a district court case. We now have recording equipment in all the county courts across the state, electronic recording equipment. We're uploading those files, so you no longer got to go sit in court or ask for a transcript and pay for that transcript of that hearing. You'll be able to go on, not only look at the documents, but also there'll be an audio file so you can hear the court proceedings that take place. That's going to happen in the next 2 to 5 years within our system. We'll be able to do it on the county court side. I've got a few wrinkles to work out on the district court side, but we'll be able to do that as well as district court trials as well. Another thing that's evolved within our court system is the open court, where we have cameras in our court. This is something relatively new within the last 2 years. There are still some states that ban cameras in the court. You can't, as a camera crew, come in and video the court proceedings. In Nebraska, you can. We have policy now that allows for that. So that's why you're seeing a lot in the news. It's live footage. Live footage from the judge, from that case, from the litigant, from the defendant, whatever it may be. There's cameras within our courts unless there's just cause shown that there shouldn't be, and the judge has to write an order as to why. So we have cameras in our courts, which was a huge step forward within our system. We've had cameras in our Supreme Court and Court of Appeals for about 10 years now. Our Supreme Court holds oral arguments once a week, the first week of the month, and then the Court of Appeals does 1 week a month, and they're the second week. And every one of those oral arguments are online. You go to any TV, and you can live stream and watch those oral arguments as they happen, and then they're archived as well. So our Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, every single one of their arguments are heard and are accessible live in that venue. Okay, one thing I want to talk to you about. Any more questions before I jump on? Great discussion. One thing I want to talk to you about is something that we're embarking on as an internship, a solidified internship program. Things are changing in the world. The job market is really good right now. So if you want a job and you're willing to work, there's a lot of jobs out there and not a lot of people applying for them. So that puts you in a good light coming upon graduation. But what we want to do is attract you to our system, whether it be internship with probation, Office of Public Guardian, whether it be with the trial courts. If you decide to go to law school, we're going to allow law clerks and work with law clerks to get them with judges in our trial court system. So you're going to be working for a judge, being a L2 or going into being an L3 law student. those types of things. And we're gonna put some money behind that, where we're gonna start paying our interns. So we're in the process. I have a team in my office right now creating policy procedure of what that looks like and what that payment structure looks like for internships. So not only will you get credit and get some of your credit for the college, also a stipend. What we'll do is pay a stipend upon successful completion or halfway through or those types of things. In the tune of, if you're going to be graduating with a 4-year degree, we're looking at a $1,500 stipend for coming and interning with probation for 250 hours, 150 hours, whatever it may be. We'll get it where it's however many hours you have to put in, equivalent to something like that. So that's going to be new coming to the judicial branch, because we see the need to attract you to what we do. And internships are we feel very valuable within our branch, because you get to see and understand and know, is that really what you want to do? And then when you go to apply for those jobs, it's going to give you a leg up. Again, that's what got me in the door in our system, was the internship that I did to give me that drug tech job, to get me that probation job, and what have you. And so I see huge value in our internship program. So we're going to be rolling that out here this spring. And what that looks like, we'll make sure that we get it to the schools and everybody's informed. We have the Office of Dispute Resolution that takes internships, Office of Public Guardian. We'll put you in one of our trial courts if that's what you want to do, work in our trial court system, in the clerk's office. If you want to work in probation, we have a lot of different things in the probation world. We can do a juvenile or adult. I could say all of that can be provided right here in Lincoln too. You wouldn't have to leave anywhere. But if you want to go anywhere, move back home for the summer, do those things, we should be able to provide almost all of those avenues within wherever you live, within driving distance across the state. Because again, we're in every county. We have probation offices in every courthouse. We have courthouses in all 93 counties, so there's something we can find that we could do an internship program with you. So that's something hot off the press, hasn't even been approved yet, that we're working on, but I wanted to throw that out there that through Chris, definitely you can make that work, and he has our connections that we can get you engaged with our probation department. So what other questions do you have? As we're dwindling down to about 10 minutes. I want to leave 10 minutes.
If no one asks, I'll ask one.
Yes.
You'd noted that western Nebraska is not very busy. Any chance that the judicial districts might be redesigned, redrawn, re-gerrymandered?
They actually will next year because of the census. They have to. But we have done a little bit tinkering with a couple of our jurisdictions over the past few years. We moved one county into District 1, Otoe County down into District 1 to help out with some judicial resources. We moved a county, I think it was Fillmore County, into District 10 to kind of help with some judicial districts. So small. If I had magic wand, I would say we need 3 or 4 judicial districts. That's it. Why? Because that would give us more flexibility. It is very, very difficult. Right now, across the state, we're dealing with an issue where judges, I'll talk about judges. Our metro areas, Omaha, Sarpy, Lancaster County, we don't have enough judges. Plain and simple, our judicial resources are very limited in those 3 jurisdictions. I have judicial resources in western Nebraska, or even not too far from here, that we could consolidate some of those counties and a judge could pick up another county, because we've just seen a decrease in the amount of court filings across our state. And it is difficult to move judicial resources. We don't have the authority in our branch. It takes a legislative action to move a judge from one judicial district to another. That way, if we had broader, bigger judicial districts, we can within a judicial district say, your office can be located elsewhere, and we had to do that up in District 6, which is Dakota City and what have you. That judge, we kind of jiggered it around there. As long as they're within that judicial district, we can move the primary office location, but we can't move a new judge in. And so if we have larger jurisdictions, that would allow us to equalize our judicial resources the way we need to. I don't think we need any new judges. I think we have enough judges. I just don't think we have them distributed in the right places at this time. We're currently in the process. We're just finishing up. We'll have it this summer a new judicial time study. And so the National Center for State Courts, they're going to be in town actually Thursday to go through it. We've already done the collection of time. We've done the collection of cases. Now we're getting all the formulas down. And so figuring out where we are, and preliminarily it's the same as our prior judicial workload study, is where there's 3 areas of the state where we're short judicial resources. And then there's about 6 areas of the state where we have excess judicial resources.
Let me follow up on my ignorance. Who draws the lines for the judicial districts? Is that
So
Mike's
there's a
job?
committee, actually. It's similar to the legislative. They're going to have to redo their boundaries, the legislative districts. When the new census come out, it triggers, state statute triggers the legislature to redo their boundaries and the judicial branch. And there's a committee that's created, and and off the top of my head, I don't know the number, but there's so many lay people that are appointed by the governor, so many from the legislature, and then so many from our branch that come together to do that. And the Judicial Resources Commission then approves it, then it goes on to the legislature. They'll debate it, so it's kind of the same concept.
Going once, going twice.
What other questions? We got 5 minutes.
More cookies to eat next door, I guess.
Anybody want me to talk about how the judicial appointment process takes place? How do you become a judge? How does the state of Nebraska do it? Because it's different in a lot of states. Why don't I quick talk about that? That'll take 3 minutes and then we'll be good, if that's okay. So a lot of people, when there's a new judicial vacancy, will say, are you going to replace that judgeship? Well, it's not up to us. It's not up to the judicial branch, and we actually don't even get to appoint or choose who we feel the best person is for that judicial opening. It is an appointment process. So the state, we don't do judicial elections like some states do judicial elections, which I am thankful for, because that brings a whole nother myriad of issues when you have judicial elections, in my opinion. But we're an appointment state, and how that works is if there's a vacancy and there's a judge opening, and we have one right now in Lancaster County Juvenile Court, you put your name in as an attorney. So you must be 36 years old. You must have been practicing in the bar for X amount of years in good standing. That's really the only requirement in the Constitution to be able to put your name in it, in the legislation to put your name in to be a judge. You essentially apply and fill out a bunch of paperwork that comes to my office, and we collect all of those that want to put their name in to become a judge. And then there's a commission which is called the Judicial Resources Commission. They must first allocate, yes, there is a judgeship, yes, there's enough need there, and yes, that should go. So then the application process, and then there's what's called the Judicial Nomination Commission. And this is chaired by a Supreme Court justice, only chaired. They cannot provide input or opinion. They're just kind of the chair of the committee. And then again, it's similar to what I talked about. There's 3 lay people. There's 3 appointments by Nebraska State Bar Association. And then there is 3 attorneys that are appointed by within that district. So there's 9 people essentially that are on a committee that interview the candidates. So the candidates come in and they get all the paperwork that was submitted to us. They then are interviewing with that committee, in front of that committee. And then any citizen, anybody can come in after their interview. It's open to the public. They will ask, is there anybody here that wants to step forward and provide any further information, good, bad, or different? And we have had that where just recently we had a group of individuals that felt one candidate wasn't qualified in what they did, and they stood up in front of the committee and put on evidence as to why they would not be a good judge. A lot of times what we see is demeanor, judicial demeanor. That's a big piece of what they look at, the attitude and how you treat people. If you know the law and if you're a good attorney within the public. After that takes place, that nomination commission meets, and in statute they must at least submit 2 candidates to the governor's office for selection. There have been times, and as of recent, just in Judicial District 6, where they didn't feel there were 2 candidates. They only felt there was 1. So they had to go through the process again and open it back up and ask for more people to apply. But there's a minimum of 2 that must be qualified based on their standards that then get submitted to the governor. Then the governor interviews, those individuals, and then the governor appoints the judge for that judgeship. It's specified where that judgeship is, which county, what level of court, and so forth. So that is all there. He just picks, this current governor just picks the person that then will be the judge, and then they're appointed. And then as a judge in the state of Nebraska, once you're appointed, there'll be what's called a retention election after 3 years. And that's if you go and when you go to vote, you see the yes or no. Should this judge be retained? Yes or no. And then after that, it's every 6 years. What we tell individuals is, in our branch, we actually have a committee working on supplying information to the general public about retention elections, because most people don't know. My wife will go to me at the time and say, okay, on the ballot, this judge and this judge, what do I do? And I say, I can't tell her. I got to be neutral. In this job, you got to be Switzerland. You have no opinions. But the general public just doesn't know about judges. You can educate yourself about our judges. There's a poll that's done by the Nebraska State Bar Association. They're actually working with us to enhance that, to get more information out. There's information if you pay attention in the press about judges. Go to our website. We put out information about judges and the things that they've been doing, or go sit in court and you can see. You can walk into any courtroom in the state. They're open, unless there's just cause to close, but they're open to sit down and see how a judge does. So that's our judicial nomination process. Well, I want to thank you. Go to our website, nebraskasupremecourt.gov. If there's any questions, my email is in there. You can get a hold of me directly if you need anything. I'm more than welcome to respond to any emails, route you to the person that needs to be. Internship, we will make sure we get as much information as quickly as we can about our internship program so we can get some of you within our judicial branch and hopefully get you hired by our judicial branch. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you all for coming. We got, again, some punch and cookies across the hall.